Okay, we are about to continue with Fahrenheit 451. As you can see, we've set up some new boxes down here as a continuation of what we did yesterday, so this way we don't have to retitle every single section. That gets a little bit tedious. So today we're still going to keep up with the page numbers. We're doing pages 36 through 48. Let's get started. The mechanical hound slept but did not sleep, lived but did not live in its gently humming, gently vibrating, softly illuminated kennel back in a dark corner of a firehouse. The dim light of 1 in the morning, the moonlight from the open sky framed through the great window, touched here and there on the brass and the copper and the steel of the faintly trembling beast. Light flickered on bits of ruby glass and on sensitive capillary hairs in the nylon-brushed nostrils of the creature that quivered gently, its 8 legs spidered under it on the rubber-padded paws. Montage slid down the brass pole. He went out to look at the city, and the clouds had cleared away completely, and he lit a cigarette and came back to bend down and look at the hound. It was like a great bee come home from some field where the honey was full of poison, wildness, of insanity and nightmare, its body crammed with that over-rich nectar, and now it was sleeping the evil out of itself. "Hello," whispered Montag, fascinated as always with the dead beast, the living beast. More dichotomy there. Nights when things got dull, which was every night, the men slid down the brass poles and set the ticking combinations of the olfactory system of the hound and let loose rats in the firehouse areaway, and sometimes chickens, and sometimes cats that would have to be drowned anyway. And there would be betting to see which of the cats or chickens or rats the hound would seize first. The animals were turned loose. 3 seconds later, the game was done. The rat, cat, or chicken caught halfway across the areaway, gripped in gentling paws while a 4-inch hollow steel needle plunged down for the proboscis of the hound to inject massive jolts of morphine or procaine. The pawn was then tossed in the incinerator. A new game begun. Montag stayed upstairs most nights when this went on. There had been a time 2 years ago when he had bet with the best of them and lost a week's salary and faced Mildred's insane anger, which showed itself in veins and blotches. But now nights he lay in his bunk, face turned to the wall, listening to the whoops and laughter below and the piano string scurry of rat feet, the violin squeaking of mice and the great shadowing motionless silence of the hound leaping out like a moth in the raw light, finding, holding its victim, inserting the needle and going back to its kennel, to die as if a switch had been turned. Montag touched the muzzle. The hound growled. Montag jumped back. The hound half rose in its kennel and looked at him with green-blue neon light flickering in its suddenly activated eye bulbs. It growled again, a strange, rasping combination of electrical sizzle, a frying sound, a scraping of metal, a turning of cogs that seemed rusty and ancient with suspicion. "No, no, boy," said Montag, his heart pounding. He saw the silver needle extend in the air an inch, pull back, extend, pull back. The growl simmered in the beast, and it looked at him. Montag backed up. The hound took a step from its kennel. Montag grabbed the brass pole with one hand. The pole, retracting, slid upward and took him through the ceiling quietly. He stepped off on the half-lit deck of the upper level. He was trembling and his face was green-white. Below, the hound had sunk back down upon the 8 incredible insect-like legs and hummed to itself again, its multifaceted eyes at peace. Montag stood, letting the fears pass by the drop hole. Behind him, 4 men at a card table under a green-lighted light in the corner glanced briefly but said nothing. Only the man with the captain's hat and the sign of the phoenix on his hat, at last, curious, his playing cards in his thin hand, talked across the long room. So let's pause and add a few notes here in our main events. The mechanical dog tried to attack Montag. Which also leads us to this question: why did that happen? Montag. It doesn't like me, said Montag. What, the hound? The captain studied his cards. Come off it. It doesn't like or dislike. It just functions. It's like a lesson in ballistics. It has a trajectory we decide on for it. It follows through. It targets itself, homes itself, and cuts off. It's only copper wire, storage batteries, and electricity. Montag swallowed. Its calculators can be set to any combination. So many amino acids, so much sulfur, so much butterfat and alkaline, right? We all know that. All of those chemical balances and percentages on all of us here in the house are recorded in the master file downstairs. It would be easy for someone to set up a partial combination on the hound's memory. A touch of amino acids, perhaps. That would account for what the animal did just now. Reacted toward me. Hell, said the captain. Irritated, but not completely angry. Just enough memory set up in it by someone so it growled when I touched it. Who would do a thing like that? Asked the captain. You haven't any enemies here, guy. None that I know of. We'll have the hound checked by our technicians tomorrow. This isn't the first time it's threatened me, said Montag. Last month it happened twice. We'll fix it up, don't worry. But Montag did not move and only stood thinking of the ventilator grill in the hall at home and what lay hidden behind the grill. If someone here in the firehouse knew about the ventilator, then mightn't they tell the hound? The captain came over to the drop hole and gave Montag a questioning glance. I was just figuring, said Montag. What does the hound think about down there nights? Is it coming alive on us, really? It makes me cold. It doesn't think anything we don't want it to think. So here we see Montag doing that very thing that we did with the There Will Come Soft Rains activity, where he's personifying this robot. That's sad, said Montag quietly, because all we put into it is hunting and finding and killing. What a shame if that's all it can ever know. Beatty snored gently. Hell, it's a fine bit of craftsmanship, a good rifle that can fetch its own targets and guarantees the bullseye every time. That's why, said Montag, I wouldn't want to be its next victim. Why? You got a guilty conscience about something? Montag glanced up swiftly. Beatty stood there looking at him steadily with his eyes while his mouth opened and began to laugh very softly. Beatty is Montag's boss. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. And as many times he came out of the house and Clarice was there somewhere in the world. Once he saw her shaking a walnut tree. Once he saw her sitting on the lawn, knitting a blue sweater. 3 or 4 times he found a bouquet of late flowers on his porch, or a handful of chestnuts in a little sack, or some autumn leaves neatly pinned to a sheet of white paper and thumbtacked to his door. Every day Clarice walked him to the corner. One day it was raining, the next it was clear. The day after that the wind blew strong. And the day after that it was mild and calm, and the day after that the calm day was a day like the furnace of a summer, and Clarice with all her face all sunburnt by late afternoon. Why is it, he said one time at the subway entrance, I feel I've known you so many years. Because I like you, she said. I don't want anything from you, and because we know each other. You make me feel very old and very much like a father. Now you explain, she said. Why you didn't have any daughters like me if you love children so much? I don't know. You're joking. I mean, he stopped and shook his head. Well, my wife, she never wanted any children at all. The girl stopped smiling. I'm sorry, I really thought you were having fun at my expense. I'm a fool. No, he said. It was a good question. It's been a long time since anyone cared enough to ask. A good question. Let's talk about something else. Have you ever smelled old leaves? Don't they smell like cinnamon? Here, smell. Why, yes, it is like cinnamon in a way. She looked at him with her clear, dark eyes. You always seem shocked. It's just I haven't had time. Did you look at the stretched out billboards like I told you? I think so. Yes. He had to laugh. Your laugh sounds much nicer than it did. Does it? Much more relaxed. He felt at ease and comfortable. Why aren't you in school? I see you every day wandering around. Oh, they don't miss me, she said. I'm antisocial, they say. I don't mix. It's so strange. I'm very social indeed. It all depends on what you mean by social, doesn't it? Social to me means talking to you about things like this. She rattled some chestnuts that had fallen off the tree in the front yard. Or talking about how strange the world is. Being with people is nice. But I don't think it's social to get a bunch of people together and then not let them talk, do you? An hour of TV class, an hour of basketball or baseball and running, another hour of transcription history or painting pictures and more sports. But we never ask questions, or at least most don't. They just run the answers at you, just bing, 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 and us sitting there for 4 more hours of film teacher. That's not social to me at all. There's a lot of funnels and a lot of water poured down the spout and out the bottom, and them telling us it's wine when it's not. They run us so ragged by the end of the day, we can't do anything but go to bed or head for a fun park to bully people around, break window panes in the window smasher place, or wreck cars in the car wrecker place with a big steel ball. Or go out in the cars and race them on the streets. Try to see how close you can get to the lamppost, playing chicken and knock hubcaps. I guess I'm everything they say I am, all right? I haven't any friends. That's supposed to prove I'm abnormal. But everyone I know is either shouting or dancing like wild or beating up one another. Do you notice how people hurt each other nowadays? You sound so very old. Okay, so let's add this into our notes as well. Clarice doesn't like school because there isn't much interaction and no questions. Sometimes I'm ancient. I'm afraid of children my own age. They'll kill each other. Did it always used to be that way? My uncle says no. 6 of my friends have been shot in the last year alone. 10 of them died in car wrecks. I'm afraid of them, and they don't like me because I'm afraid. My uncle says his grandfather remembered when children didn't kill each other. But that was a long time ago when they had things different. They believed in responsibility, my uncle says. Do you know I'm responsible? I was spanked when I needed it years ago, and I do all the shopping and house cleaning by hand. But most of all, she said, I like to watch people. Sometimes I ride subway all day and look at them and listen to them. I just want to figure out who they are and what they want and where they're going. Sometimes I even go to the fun parks and ride in jet cars when they race on the edge of town at midnight, and the police don't care as long as they're insured. As long as everyone has 10,000 insurance, everyone's happy. Sometimes I sneak around and listen in subways, or I listen at soda fountains. And do you know what? What? People don't talk about anything. Oh, they must. No, not anything. They name a lot of cars or clothes or swimming pools mostly and say, how swell. But they all say the same thing, and nobody says anything different from anyone else. And most of the time in the cafes, they have the joke boxes on, and the same jokes most of the time are the musical wall lit and all the colored patterns running up and down. But it's only color and it's all abstract. And at the museums, have you ever been all abstract? That's all there is now. My uncle says it was different once. A long time back, sometimes pictures said things or even showed people. Your uncle said, your uncle said. Your uncle must be a remarkable man. He is. He certainly is. Well, I've got to be going. Goodbye, Mr. Montag. Goodbye. Goodbye. So there was a lot of talking in that passage. There wasn't a lot of action happening, not a lot of events happened, but it did leave us with some good questions. Do we agree with Clarice in the fact that times used to be different? This is futuristic, but we still hear this all the time. Older people, adults will say, oh, back in my day, kids were responsible and they're not responsible anymore. Uh, do we agree with that? Is that something that actually happened, or is that just nostalgia covering up the fact that no, things haven't always been like that? Do people have actual conversations today, or is it, as Clarice suggests, they just name things and talk about nothing in particular? Let's ask that question here. Is Clarice correct? Okay, and when we look at this question, we want to make sure that we're clear. We're not asking about in the book, but if the book is supposed to parallel real life, is this statement accurate? Is it correct? Do we believe this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. The Firehouse. Montag, you shin that pole like a bird up a tree. Third day. Montag, I see you came in the back door this time. That hound bother you? No, no. Fourth day. Montag, a funny thing. Heard tell this morning. Fireman in Seattle purposely set a mechanical hound to his own chemical complex and let it loose. What kind of suicide would you call that? 5, 6, 7 days. And then Clarice was gone. He didn't know what there was about the afternoon, but it was not seeing her somewhere in the world. The lawn was empty, the trees empty, the streets empty. And while at first he did not even know he missed her or was even looking for her, the fact was that by the time he reached the subway, there was a vague stirring of dis-ease in him. Something was the matter. His routine had been disturbed. A normal routine, true, established in a few short days, and yet he almost turned back to make the walk again, to give her time to appear. He was certain if he tried the same route, everything would work out fine. But it was late, and the arrival of his train put a stop to his plan. So this is one we should probably mark down up here in our key events. Clarice went missing after they talked. Is she gone temporarily, or is this something permanent? Have they just moved on, or is it something more sinister? Let's find out. A flutter of cards, a motion of hands, of eyelids, the drone of the time voice in the firehouse ceiling. 1:35, Thursday morning, November 4th. 1:36, 1:37 a.m. The tick of the playing cards on the greasy tabletop. All the sounds came to Montag, behind his closed eyes, behind the barriers he had momentarily erected. He could feel the firehouse full of glitter and shine and silence, of brass colors, the colors of coins, of gold, of silver. The unseen men across the table were sighing on their cards, waiting. 1:45. The voice clock mourned out the cold hour of a cold morning of a still colder year. What's wrong, Montag? Montag opened his eyes. A radio hummed somewhere. War may be declared any hour. This country stands ready to defend its... The firehouse trembled as a great flight of jet planes whistled a single note across the black morning sky. It's a really subtle reference here about war may be declared, but it does explain the presence of the jets. We should probably mark this down. Montag blinked. Beatty was looking at him as if he were a museum statue. At any moment, Beatty might rise and walk about him, touching, exploring his guilt and self-consciousness. Guilt? What guilt was that? You play, Montag. Montag looked at these men whose faces were sunburnt by 1,000 real and 10,000 imaginary fires, whose work flushed their cheeks and fevered their eyes, these men who looked steadily into their platinum igniter flames as they lit their eternally burning black pipes. They and their charcoal hair and soot-colored brows and bluish ash-smeared cheeks, where they had shaven close, but their heritage showed. Montag started up, his mouth opened. Had he ever seen a fireman that didn't have black hair, black brows, a fiery face, and blue steel shaved but unshaved look? These men were all mirror images of himself. Were all firemen picked then for their looks as well as their proclivities? Let's pull up that vocabulary word as our first one here. Proclivity. Proclivity, a tendency to choose or do something regularly. A tendency to choose the same thing over and over. The colors of cinders and ash about them, but the continual smell of burning from their pipes. Captain Beatty there, rising in thunderheads of tobacco smoke. Beatty opening a fresh tobacco packet, crumpling the cellophane into a sound of fire. Montag looked at the cards in his own hands. I've been thinking. About the fire last week, about the man whose library we fixed. What happened to him? They took him screaming off to the asylum. He wasn't insane. Beatty arranged his cards quietly. Any man's insane who thinks he can fool the government and us. I've tried to imagine, said Montag, just how it would feel. I mean, to have firemen burn our houses and our books. We haven't any books. But if we did have some, you got some? Beatty blinked slowly. No. Montag gazed beyond them to the wall with a typed list of 1,000,000 forbidden books. Their names leapt in fire, burning down the years under his axe and his hose, which sprayed not water but kerosene. No. But in his mind, a cool wind started up and blew out the ventilator grill at home, softly chilling his face, and again he saw himself in a green park talking to an old man, a very old man, and the wind from the park was cold too. So the ability to put yourself in another person's shoes, to imagine what they go through, it's a concept that we discussed during the Most Dangerous Game. Let's mark this down because it's an important key event of the story. Montag is showing empathy. And at a time when people don't really talk to each other or care about each other, the idea of showing empathy is something new, of actually caring about something that's not something that you see all the time. It's not illegal, it's just so rare that people aren't used to it. Montag hesitated. What? Was it always like this firehouse, our work? I mean, well, once upon a time. Once upon a time, Beatty said. What kind of talk is that? Fool, thought Montag to himself. You'll give it away. The Last Fire, a book of fairy tales, he'd glanced at a single line. I mean, he said, in the old days, before homes were completely fireproofed. Suddenly it seemed a much younger voice was speaking for him. He opened his mouth, and it was Clarice McClellan saying, Didn't firemen prevent fires rather than stoke them and get them going? And that's rich. Stoneman and Black drew forth their rule books, which also contained brief histories of the firemen of America, and laid them out where Montag, though long familiar with them, might read. Established 1790 to burn English-influenced books in the colonies. First fireman Benjamin Franklin. Rule 1. Answer the alarm quickly. 2. Start the fire swiftly. 3. Burn everything. 4. Report back to Firehouse immediately. 5. Stand alert for other alarms. Everyone watched Montag. He did not move. The alarm sounded. The bell in the ceiling kicked itself 200 times. Suddenly, there were 4 empty chairs. The cards fell in a flurry of snow. The brass pole shivered. The men were gone. Montag sat in his chair. Below, the orange dragon coughed a life. Montag slid down the pole like a man in a dream. The mechanical hound leapt up in its kennel, its eyes all green flame. Montag, you forgot your helmet! He seized it off the wall behind him, ran, leapt, and they were off, the night wind hammering into their siren scream and their mighty metal thunder. So that is where we will end for today. Let's mark down these last few notes. Men respond to a fire alarm. We're going to stop here and we'll pick this up